Right. All right, y'all see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Just a quick introduction of me. My name is Mark Kruth. I'm a senior solutions architect with Atlassian. Also, you'll see me on LinkedIn as a team doctor. I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end too. But basically, my role as an architect, solutions architect, I work with organizations to help them roll out Jira Align, help kind of find, essentially how do we map your practices and process with the tooling so that you're most successful. And today I want to tell you a little bit about this aspect of enterprise agility and how you gain that, or at least start that journey with Jira Align. So we'll go through. I have a couple slides, and then of course we're going to get into the meat of this thing, which is going to be the demo, so y'all can see what that looks like and the how the tool actually works. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. So I'm going to make a bold statement. Jira Align is the only platform for scaling Agile to the enterprise, and I'm going to stick by that. It's one of those things I joke around. Last week we had Team 22. We were in Las Vegas, and I'd put money on that because really Jira Align, what it does is it's very much focused on taking practices that have worked really well for team agility and then scaling them to the enterprise, helping provide that aggregation, understanding that there are different problems to solve at different layers of scale. And I would say many products out there just simply they try to be everything to everybody, and by doing that, they end up being nothing for the people who matter. And so for us in Align, one of the things that you find is that Align is very intentionally built, meaning that as a product, we have very strong opinions about how to scale, and it's built into the product, and you'll see that as we go. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But before we I want to tell you a little bit about what I mean by that, and that's where I want to kind of talk a little bit about what it means for what Agile at scale means from our perspective. And so let's kind of jump into this. And so Jira Align, we kind of talk about it has 4 layers of scale. There's technically 5, but there's 4 for all intensive purposes. And it's all about, one, how we organize around work. Now, if you're familiar with things like the Scaled Agile framework, this is going to look familiar. It's going to look, you're going to see some of the similarities there. But the thing is if you're familiar with other scaling frameworks, Scrum at Scale, Nexus, these sorts of things, they're all leveraging similar constructs in terms of how they work, all having groups within groups of groups, or teams of teams within teams of teams and teams. All of them use the same constructs. And so for Align, we just base ourselves initially off Scaled Agile, but we have many customers who use it across many different frameworks. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of the 4 layers. So at any organization, you're going to start with your strategy, or your enterprise level. This is where essentially we're making governing decisions around what we're trying to do as an organization. We're trying to say, hey, by the end of this year, we want to try to be this to the world, or we want to try to accomplish this goal. This is where executives, our finance teams, our PMOs, these groups will live, because this is where they're ultimately helping us to provide direction so our ships know where to sail. Now from there, we have what we consider our portfolio layer. And so here, this is where we kind of talk about this aspect of where we map strategy to execution. And I love that line, because basically what we're doing is, in strategy, we're very abstract. We're very, it's gray and fuzzy. Here at Portfolio, we're starting to crisp up the lines. We're starting to say, awesome, in order to accomplish this strategy, we have to execute certain things. And for us, that's going to be things like portfolio epics, initiatives, these sorts of objects that basically are large hypotheses that saying, hey, if we do this, we believe this will be the outcome, and we believe that outcome will support this strategy. So we have portfolio managers, we've got customers that play in this realm, we've got epic owners. This is where essentially we have very large rocks that we're trying to move around to say, hey, if we put these pawns on the board the right way, we'll win the chess match. Now from there, we have really where the first level of, I like to think of, a business value starts coming out. And this is our team of teams, or our program layer. This is where we actually organize, plan, and execute our work. One thing that you'll find is that at this layer, we're talking about things like features or objects like that. And to me, those are the actual manifestation of business value. Things like user stories do provide business value, but it's the connection of multiple user stories to kind of form what I like to think of as the feature box. User stories represent all the sides of the box, but the box is what provides value for that customer. And so for us, this is where, on a certain cadence, we're delivering features that help support, that portfolio epic or initiative that helps drive that strategy. This is that first manifestation of value coming out. And the big thing, the last one to note, and the most important one of this whole thing is going to be, of course, the team layer. Program, portfolio, and enterprise are all extra on top of the team. They're all supplemental. And honestly, it's their whole goal is to help ensure that the teams doing the work know the direction that they need to go. Otherwise, our teams are going to keep working. And that's the thing. That's the beautiful thing. Our teams are going to keep producing value. Is it the right value at the right time for the right problem? And so for us, as we think about these 4 layers, you're going to see this manifest itself in Align, where the team is all about execution, whereas in program, portfolio, and enterprise, we focus in on how do we ensure that that execution is happening at the right time. So let's talk a little bit about this mapping here. This is going to be a chart that I want you to remember as we get into the demo, because this is really how Jira Align gets organized. And so for us, we think about 3 elements: people, work, and time. When we think about people, we think about that as organizing units, the things on that last slide: the enterprise, the portfolio, the program, the team. Now, this isn't necessarily our hierarchy in our organization, but it's how we team together. It's how we organize groups. Now, each one of those groups will be associated with a type of work. And this is where you'll see the work items come in. The highest levels, we talked about strategy is our object that we're playing with here, which can then break down to the things like themes or initiatives or epics. These can be distilled into multiple objects, which then break down into, at the program level, the program owns aspects like features. And of course, our teams own stories. And so within each of these, you can start seeing how these objects connect. And it has to be how you organize with the work you have, start having a connection. The last element here, which is an important one, is time. So for us, we may have a great layout of teams and work, but we have to be thinking about cadence. And Scrum taught us a lot of great things about how time boxing helped us to allowed us to sprint, to be able to say, hey, we've got a goal. Let's take 2 weeks to try to figure out how we get there. Well, we're going to, a lot of different frameworks have taken that construct and says, hey, let's build on that. So although teams may still have sprints, we support, Scrum and Kanban here though. Teams may have sprints, programs have a larger increment. Programs may have quarters or program increments. Organizations have an increment themselves, if you think about it. We have annual cycles, and that's where our strategy lives, and we call that a strategic snapshot. And so for us, we can start seeing how organizations have strategic snapshots, programs have PIs or quarters, teams have sprints, and it's building within these small feedback loops that get bigger and bigger that allow us to help, again, move towards that strategy and pivot as we go. Excuse me. So that just gives you an idea of, essentially for us in Jira Align, we're taking these constructs, and again, we're being very intentional and we're putting them in. So with that said, let's actually just get in. You've had enough of me just giving you slides. Let's actually go take a look at the tool. All right, so I've moved over. We're in Jira Align now, so welcome. If you haven't seen it before, this is where you kind of land. As a heads up too, Jira Align is exploring. We're doing some beta testing right now with a new experience for the UI to help kind of continue to align us more and more with the Atlassian feel, the Jira feel, those sorts of things. So what you might see in this demo is going to be our current view, and hopefully in a 3 months or so, you'll start seeing the current view more publicly out there. But I'm going to walk you through what you see here. So just to kind of orient you around what you're seeing here. First off, you have on the left-hand side, you have your functionality navigation, and you're going to notice some similarities. We're going to see we've got areas such as our enterprise, we've got our portfolio, our program. Remember those layers? This is where we control essentially what functionality each one of these constructs need. Because remember, a team is going to use different functionality than a program, than a portfolio, than an enterprise. And so for if I'm a portfolio member, I'm going to be focused in on the functionality likely at the portfolio level. Now here up the top, we've got this aspect of being able to change up how we view our data. And so for me, what I always like to think about this as is think of Jira Align this almost like this massive pivot table with lots of complexity in terms of how we can change things around. Here I can look and say, what type of data do I want to look at? Do I want to look at a portfolio called digital services? Do I want to look at a program called mobile? Or do I want to look at a team called Baltimore? In an enterprise, you're going to have multiple portfolios. And so you can see here where you can have multiple sets of data. We can control, who sees what data, who will see what data. So right now I'm logged in as a super user, and so I can see all the data, but you can also go in and say, well, I only want this group to see this portfolio, and that's totally doable. You could also then look and break this data down by time. This told us what data set we're playing with. This tells us what aspect of that data set. Here right now I'm looking at PI5, which is which is running from, I believe, February through the beginning of May. And so that is a period of time that we have that we're looking at. And then, of course, we have other ones that you can start looking at too: release vehicles, products, organizational structures, and then a few others that aren't enabled right now. But these essentially allow you to then break your data down. So for the sake of our demo as we're going through, so again, keep those areas in mind. That's how we'll be looking at data. But for the sake of our demo, I'm actually going to be using our product to help guide our demo. And one of the features that I love about it is we've got this little clipboard up here. This clipboard gives us access to two things. It gives us access to training simulations. So if you want to do some learning, you can go watch some videos that are interactive. And what we have, checklists. And checklists are a cool tool. They basically allow you to set up a predefined path that you might want to follow. And it basically allows you to say, hey, I want to go here, and then I want to go here. And so it allows you to build in potentially process or ceremony into the tool. So of course, I'm going to use the Jira Align demo checklist that I created yesterday to help kind of guide us. So what we're seeing here is a step-by-step process that I'm going to basically walk us through over the next 40 minutes. We're basically going to go through and we're going to learn a little bit about how Jira Align works from the lens of a story. We're going to start with that aspect of starting with strategy, ultimately going through execution and coming back to strategy. And then I do want to give you a little bit of a glimpse into terms of how our integration works with products like Jira, so that you can kind of see how Jira Align is great, but when you have Jira and Jira Align together, it's even better for your teams. So let's jump into this thing. So the first place we're going to go to in our checklist, our first stop on our journey, is going to be talking about strategy, because in any organization, we always start with strategy. Again, just as you saw that area, if we don't start here, we're going to do stuff, but we're not going to understand the why. And so for us to talk about strategy, I'm going to go ahead and bring us to what we call our strategy room. Now to do this too, I'm also going to change some of our data. I want to bring in a few more lenses of data, so a few more PIs in here. I'm going to then select that snapshot. Remember, as an organization, we have an annual snapshot. So here's my corporate strategy for 2022. And what I get presented with is a bit of a dashboard for the organization in terms of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it's actually going. So I'll just kind of walk you through real quick what we see here. So at first glimpse, someone who comes into your strategy room can understand, again, your mission, vision, values, things that are important that kind of drive your strategy as an organization. And then kind of coming down into our strategy pyramid, they can see what objects are built in to this particular strategy. So because we're in 2022, we know we have a couple different things going on. We know we have 5 strategic goals that we're trying to accomplish in this annual cycle. We've got 5 themes. We've got 8 portfolio objectives, 16 epics, 34 features. These are all things that are brought in. And if I go in and if we're going to look through, I can say, hey, is there anything that's misaligned? Meaning that work is tagged for this, but it's actually being done somewhere else. So I can start seeing, how much work is actually within this cycle. Here in the right-hand side, I can start actually understanding progress against that work too. One of the ways you're going to see us talk about progress is in terms of goals and objectives and the work associated with them. So in this case, you'll notice that we've got execution against outcomes. We have the goals but we have our objectives at each level. And we can say, hey, there's certain work tied to these objectives. We've got themes set to strategic goals, epics to portfolio objectives, and then features can tag back up to both program objectives as well as team objectives. And we can see our overall progress on completing that work to date in the cycle. So at this point, we say, we got almost 50% of our epics done, a little over 50% of our features done, which makes sense because, again, epics are going to work on longer cycles than features, which work on smaller cycles. We can also go down here too and actually be able to understand how are we doing from our overall snapshot perspective. So all the work tagged, and we can see, hey, how many of these items have we got done to date? And we'll also include things like dependencies, because even for an a large organization, the Achilles heel for an organization is typically the inner connections between teams. So tracking dependencies is also a big thing. So this just gives me an initial view. But I think the thing that I love most about this is actually down below the fold, and this is going to be where you actually start talking about your outcomes. So for us at Jira Align, we've invested heavily in this aspect of OKR, so objectives and key results. There's a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. If you haven't read that, highly recommend it. It'll give you some insights in terms of how we're approaching OKRs from a Jira Align perspective. But the idea is that OKRs live at multiple levels, and with an objective, we're going to have key results or key measures that we're going to have along the way. And for us, we're going to have organizational strategic goals that are going to span the whole year. Within that, we're going to have quarter-based objectives. And for us at the beginning, you're going to be able to see a heat map of how objectives are actually doing. We can see overall at the enterprise, we're doing okay, but down below, maybe we're not doing so well. Maybe we're needing to improve in certain areas compared to others. And then down below here, you get presented with what we call our objectives tree. This objectives tree allows you to take a strategic goal and follow it down to its lowest object to see how things nest. So we have this idea of capitalizing on emerging trends, which feeds into portfolio objectives, to program objectives, and ultimately there's a team objective called grow our Android daily user active users that we believe tied directly to that capitalize on emerging trends. And so for us, we can then measure things like our key results around this and the progress against those. So if we have certain measures, in this case, grow our daily Android active users, we may have a target. How are we doing against that target? I'll show you a little bit about that here towards the end of the demo. But this just gives you the ability to kind of get that one-stop shop. An executive or a senior leader in an organization, we want them to get out of the weeds, and we want them to, of the day-to-day execution, and we want them focused on outcomes. Let them tell us where they'd like us to go. We'll get us there. And that's what this is built around. So in our story, let's assume, hey, we built out our strategy. We have an idea of what ideas we're trying to go. We have those program, those portfolio, those strategic goals. We've got the right objectives. Now we can start as an organization, start thinking about, well, what work is actually needed to support this? What work fills up this pyramid here? And to do that, we're actually going to go to our backlog. And so let's take our next step in our journey. So here, I'm going to go ahead and let's complete the strategy because we've gone ahead and we've done that. Let's go to our backlog now. So backlogs in any product are a critical piece, as we know. To me, I always talk about backlogs being the what we consider the backbone of any good planning product. And so for us, I'm going to go ahead and bring us to our backbone, and that's going to be the backlog. Backlog is a single view that allows you to look at all your data or slice your data by time. It'll also allow you to look at your data by a whole portfolio, in this case, which we're going to see, or by a program. So within this, we can see certain different objects. Right now, we can look at a theme backlog, which in this case, if I were to bring up a theme backlog, I can see we have 12 total themes across the digital services program. Now, if I were to go in and say, well, what themes am I working on in PI 5, let's say, I could apply PI 5, and what will happen here is now I will see I have 6 themes that I'm focused on PI 5. If I go down, I can then look and say, well, what epics am I working on here too? And this will again give me that aspect of, oh, I'm working on 59 epics in this time frame. And just like any good backlog, I'm going to be able to provide you some information. I'm going to be able to break these down to show you the work underneath them. And I'm also going to be able to drag and drop to change priority. So this is going to give me that ability to have a one-stop shop for that. Now, let's say I want to get down to and look at a particular program. Let's say as an organization, we've come up with our themes, our epics, and we've said, all right, we're going to go and we're going to have a program called mobile. So I'm going to go ahead and say, cool, our mobile program, and we're going to say, hey, mobile program, we want you to help break down these epics. So in this case, mobile program, we believe these 53 epics here belong, that you have some stake in the game here. Awesome. So what we're going to do is start breaking that down into things like features. And so for us, features are our Jira epics. These are things that are going to bi-directionally sync, and I'll talk about that at the end. But now I can start saying, all right, in PI5, I've broken this down into to be 66 total Jira epics or features that we would be working on as a team. And so this gives me that ability now to continue to break that down. What's kind of cool about this too is that my backlog view actually doubles as two things. It works as a one-stop shop for a one-to-end list. But in addition, here in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see this word called Kanban. Here I can go and look at what is a value stream view. The value stream view is really a Kanban view. It allows me to see my process, my Kanban. And so here as a program, I can go in and see, here's the work that is in each step of my Kanban. You know, what's in my funnel, what's in implementing, what's in validating. I can see where that work is at. And the nice thing is I can move up a level here too. So if I go to epics, I can see the same Kanban for all the epics, say, hey, where are all these epics at? And what's really neat here too is we can actually go through, and one of the valuable pieces about Kanban is that the idea is work needs to meet certain exit criteria before it moves over. We don't automate that, but what we do is we make it very intentional for the users, and we say, hey, go in and specify what it means to move from reviewing to analyzing. And in this case, I can hit this show exit criteria. And here I can see that in order to leave reviewing the reviewing stage, I need to have a lean canvas that's been approved. And I also have to have initial budget approval. And so again, now when I have an open slot here in analyzing, I can pull guided research over if it meets that criteria. So it gives me that ability to again visualize my flow and focus on that, which is pretty cool. So we've gone ahead, and let's say we had our strategy, we went ahead and we started breaking down our work, and now we've broken ourselves down into some features and some epics. So many organizations, as they break that work down, their next big goal is for them to start thinking about things like road mapping. How do I actually think about time here? How do I actually roll this out? And so let's go ahead and let's talk about now, how do I start applying better leverages of time on this? So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go to our roadmap view. One of the things we're going to do, and initially you're going to see this in the roadmap, is it's going to focus on one PI. Usually in a roadmap, I want to focus on longer amounts of time. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm focused on PI5. I'm going to add PI6 and PI7. So now we're thinking about 9 months out as an organization. And the thing I can start doing is I can start looking at how my roadmap might play out. Now, right off the bat, what you're seeing here is you're seeing a nested view. You're seeing a Jira epic or feature by epic, meaning the rows you see are epics right now. These are epics that have been planned out, and you'll notice periods of time here, PI5, PI6, PI7. I can see here that, let's say, microservices for MDM, I have that planned against 2 PIs right now, PI5 and PI6. Now, if I were to open this, hit this little caret here, I can see how I'm planning my work on it underneath it. These are the different features then underneath this one. I can say, all right, I've got these features here, and look, I've got a feature here for customer data structuring that's in PI6. So I can start plotting out my execution underneath each epic, so that way I can understand, all right, what it is that I'm working on, what's the plan of attack for that. I can actually raise this up a level too. So if I really wanted to look at things like right now, I'm looking at features by epic. I can also look at my epic by theme. So if I have large themes, I can say, all right, what are the epics and when are those epics taking place underneath that? I can also look at individual objects too. So here's just my features. Gives me the ability to say, what features am I doing in PI5? What's in PI6? What do I have planned for PI7? And this list looks about right, because all of a sudden I'm going to have much more detail in my current PI5 than I am in my next PI versus the PI after that. So it gives me the ability to see that. And one of the things you're going to notice, you're like, Mark, what are all those little numbers here? These are actually representing the stories that are within this feature. So as we plan out stories, if we're a Kanban, or if we're a Kanban team, this will play out. we have certain aspects of time. So for Scrum and Kanban teams, we have anchors that are out there. As stories are completed or planned, we can see when that work is out there for. You can say, hey, in sprint 24 for AP2 machine stabilization, we've got 3 stories here planned for that across maybe 1 to many teams here. And so it gives me the ability to see that. It also gives me the ability to see things that might be out of alignment. So in this case, I've got, notice there's a 6, but when I add these up, I only have 5. Likely means that there's a story that's not planned here. It's not in a sprint. So it allows me to ask that question. Hey, are we missing something? So it starts giving me some of that ability. I can also see from the colors just general status. Green means we're on track. Blue means we believe we're done. Things like that. And if I right click on that, I can see the different statuses I can set here. So I've been going through, again, we took our strategy, broke it down to work, and now we've roadmapped it. We said, hey, let's focus in on PI 5. I'm going to look just at PI 5 because that's going to be our active PI. And I can see here, this is all the work that we've planned. These are all the different aspects we have. So at this point, we probably haven't actually planned it yet. That's kind of the next step of the process. As a product manager or somebody out there kind of driving this plan, I can say, hey, these are the, let's say 66 features that I would like to see done in the next quarter, next PI. So now what I can do with this is I can say, all right, let's give it to the teams. Teams got to go and validate for us what they can and can't do. And so we're going to go into our next step here, and that is actually the planning process. And for me, where I like to go through for that is going to be our program board. So let's go take a look at that. All right, so welcome to our program board. So if you're familiar with things, again, like Scaled Agile, there is a construct there of this program board. And I find it incredibly valuable regardless of the framework you use because it allows you to visualize your plan. Now, on this board, you're going to see a lot of things. It looks very busy now, doesn't it? So let's go ahead and change that a little bit. I'm going to come up here to the top right-hand corner, click this button. Right now, we're in what we call normal view. I'm going to go to small view, and it's going to shrink it down a little bit to give me a little bit more of a bird's eye view. And so what we're going to see here is we're going to see a couple different things. First, you're going to see across the left-hand side, you're going to see the different teams within this particular program. So for a program board, that program board is going to be used by a program to help plan their execution. We've got, in this case, 5 teams that are in this group. Across the columns here, you're going to see the sprints within PI 5. And then within here, you're going to see the work, and you're going to see different variations of the work. So a couple of things to know. Anything that is a rectangle, pure rectangle, that is representative of a feature. So if I click on this one, you're going to see that I've got here a quick view for feature 1636, and this is platform component performance and sizing. In this case, I can see some general information about this. I can see what teams are working on it. In this case, just Baltimore. I can see what target sprint it's set for to be completed, and I can also see the work underneath it in this case. And so this gives me a quick view of things I need to know from a planning perspective. Now, an interesting starts coming out as you start seeing other icons here on the screen too. Notice these little icons here. And so they kind of look like a rectangle with the corners cut out. Well, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and the Motor City. And so I like to call them the Chevy symbol. And so the Chevy symbol here, if you open this up, it's actually a dependency. So Chevy symbols represent dependencies in our system. And what's important here to note is that dependencies are treated like a first-class object in the system, meaning that they're not an issue link. It's not saying, hey, this depends on this. There's actually a handshake agreement that has to happen through an object in our system to say, hey, I need this by this time frame from this team. And so this is a representation of a team that says, hey, I need help from Baltimore. And so in this case, there's another program here outside of this program, the web program, that says, hey, I need help from Baltimore to get this thing done. And so Baltimore said, cool, I can do it. And in this case, they've actually said they completed it and they've committed to it. So they said, yep, we did it. We were going to do it and we've already taken care of it. So here I can track my dependencies and see how are they actually progressing. The last symbol to kind of take a look at here are these little kind of diamond shapes. Diamond shapes are going to represent things such as objectives. We've got areas where a team's going to have let's say in this case, it's a team objective, as you can see. We can see the overall status of that, and we can also see the work associated with it. In this case, we have one feature tied to this objective. So we can say, hey, how are we doing here? We know we've got one feature we're doing to support it. We can then go in, and once that feature's done, assess how we did on that objective. So for us, this gives us that one-stop shop view to see how work is laid out across the quarter in this case. Now, the most important thing I think about this page is that it's the colors on here. It's the colors, the icons, those sorts of things. Because what this page will do is, as you plan work out, Jira Align kind of provide you some faux AI aspects, where it's basically it's looking for certain information, and if it doesn't get that, it's going to throw some red flags for you, and that's what's going to come across in the colors. As you imagine with green, green means good. Green in this case, without a check mark, means you got everything done, but the work is still in progress. Going back to that performance and sizing, you notice that the story here is all done. There's no dependencies, there's no risks, but the actual feature is still in progress. If I go over to this one, which has the check mark on it, it means all the work is done and the feature itself has been done. It's been accepted. So this gives me a visualization of how this work's going. Now, as somebody who's executing a plan or is doing this, I care less about the green. I care more about the other colors. As you imagine here, you get into some of these colors. Yellow is going to be a risk. In this case, I've got work, but I have an open risk here. And this is something where I can then say, hey, there could be something that goes wrong. Until that risk is closed out, I'm always going to be triggering a yellow flag on this. As you elevate in colors, you move into orange. Orange is going to say, hey, this is a little bit more of a planning issue. In this case, it says, hey, there are some stories that are not assigned to any team. So if I come down here, I can say, oh, hey, I've got these 3 stories. I have no target. I have no team. So this tells me as someone who's dealing with this plan, says, hey, there might be a problem here. There might be something where we might think we're going to get it done by sprint 28, but there's a hole right here we need to fill. So it's a warning for me. And then the last one to kind of talk about is red. And red is really saying, hey, you have a problem right now. You need to correct it today. And this is going to say things like, hey, there's dependencies that are scheduled for past sprints for features. This case, this is the dependency that is needed by sprint 27. It was committed by sprint 28 and it's blocked. So if they don't get it by sprint 28, we're in trouble. And so we've got to go resolve that right away. So as somebody who's as I plan out my plan, my goal here is to come away with this without any red, without any orange if I can avoid it. Sometimes there's going to be yellow because I have risks I can't resolve right away. But the goal is to not enter into a plan that is already fraught with peril. And so for me as a team, this is what I'm going to be using this for, laying out my plan. I can go into a lot more detail on this, but we've only got limited time. But this is how we're essentially going to take that strategy that broke into work that we roadmap and actually say, this is how we're going to do it this quarter. So now we got a plan. We've done it. We've said that. Well, now the hard part begins, right? This is the actual execution. So for execution, I want to show you a couple different things. I'm going to show you first our progress view. This to me is what I call our the command center for the quarter for a program. And what we call it is our program room. Our program room gives us basically a dashboard of information about how the program's doing, how we're executing overall, and if there's anything we got to worry about. Here we've got widgets that we have available that can be removed if needed and can be moved around. On my left, I've set it up the way I normally set up my dashboard. The way I've set it up is I say, hey, I want to be able to, one, you're going to always see what work you've got done, what you have planned for the quarter. And then here on my left-hand side, I like to think about, well, how are we doing with progress, both as a program, so overall, as well as then by team. I can see here overall progress, but I can say, hey, how is the teams doing against what they loaded up this quarter? I can see Houston's a little bit, they've only got 300 of the 435 points done. And where we're at, we're kind of behind, we've only got 10 days left. We've only got about 20% left of our time. So if I'm going to be someone worried about execution, I'm probably going to go talk to Houston, find out what's going on. I can also understand a little bit about my load. I can say, hey, how much did I load up? In this case, I can see I definitely overloaded my PI. I can only, previously, I could only do 1,545 points. That's usually what my velocity is. I took in 2,100 points. That's a little much. And then I can see how that may have manifested down here. And no wonder Houston is falling behind. They have 112% loaded. So that means they have more than they normally can do. I can also see things like release vehicles or releases I'm doing too. Here in the middle, I'm gonna actually, let me go to this column here first. Here I put all the things I need to action on. If I have action items that are out there, if I have impediments I need to think about, where are my risks and my dependencies at? I can also see the performance of my objectives too. So it gives me that view. And here in the middle, it gives me the view of seeing things like if I have a checklist I'm following. Here, I might put a checklist in here of maybe my weekly scrum of scrums. Here are the 5 things we need to look at every week as part of a scrum of scrums. I can look at my sprints and how they're doing. I can see, hey, where are we at? Where are we in relation to the completion of that work? And say, oh, hey, we're almost done with the sprint and we've only got 16 of the 39 stories done. All right, are they all going to drop at the end? Do we have risk we got to worry about? Let's talk about it. Down below is our runway, which is all about trying to project to you how much work you should have refined in any given time. And down below, of course, you're going to see your features. And the 2 things I love the most out of this is actually not this section, but it's these. And again, it's because Align tries to give you some insights. First off is orphan stories. These are stories that don't have a feature. And so that might be okay, but we want you to know about it. The next one is even more important. These are stories that are being worked on this PI that belong to features that are not in this PI. So that means, hey, we didn't plan this, but we're doing this work. And that's a lot. I mean, we got 53 stories. We have 438 or 348 stories we're working on. About 1/7 of our work is work that is not scheduled for this PI. So as a product manager, I might ask some questions about that. So again, this gives me that ability to see where everything's at a given time. Now let me bring back up my checklist here because I think I closed it. So you can see where we're at so far with our progress and our journey. And so for us, there's a couple things I want to show you here just as you continue to execute. I talked about risks and dependencies. One of the things you might be doing with your risks is you might be constantly thinking about how you roam those risks. And for us, when we roam risk, it's all about talking about where risks are at any given time. ROAM stands for that acronym of resolved, owned, accepted, and mitigated. It's basically the state that a risk is in. And as somebody who cares about that execution, making sure we're doing well, I want to make sure that things that, especially, resolved risks, awesome. That's the end state. Owned, accepted, mitigated, ultimately I want to keep having conversations, particularly owned ones, because owned ones say, I have no plan. Accepted ones are things that we said, oh, we don't think there's a way to resolve this, but I usually push back on my team saying there's got to be something we can do, even something small that we can do to try to mitigate this. And then mitigated, of course, says, hey, we've got a plan, hasn't occurred yet, but fingers crossed, we think we're good. So we can overall see a status of how our risks are doing in the current PI or quarter to say, hey, how are we doing right now? We can see that, hey, we don't have a terrible number of risks, but if this was more like 30 risks, I may be spending a lot of time on here. Our next thing that we're also going to be doing along with risks is going to be talking about dependencies. And so I want to show you real quick our dependency maps. And so dependency maps are really neat because they give you the ability to, as I mentioned, dependencies are first-class objects. How do we visualize those in the sense? So for us, I'm going to actually show you 2 views. So when we're thinking about dependency maps, we have a couple of different views you can use. First one I'm going to look at is going to be called our grid view. Grid view is nice because what it does, it allows you to see how dependencies relate across teams and where there might be clusters. In this case, who's requesting it? Who do they need? And so if we go across the bar here, we can see that there are some teams that have a lot of dependencies usually going to them. We can see Baltimore, Cowboys, Tigers. They've got a lot of dependencies going to them. And even more specifically, we can see where there's higher numbers. In this case, there are multiple teams that have multiple dependencies on Baltimore. I mean, shoot, we've got Cowboys needing Baltimore for 3 dependencies this PI. Those are ones that we want to go in and say, hey, what are these dependencies? But then also, are there ways for us to help mitigate these in the future? Can we help figure out how we cross-train? How are we actually doing across those? And so this gives me some insights in terms of future planning to say, hey, what opportunities do we have as a program, as a portfolio, to think about our dependencies and reduce those? Because again, the things that slow us down, the biggest thing that slows an organization down is dependencies. So if we're going to remove as many of those as possible, awesome. The last view I want to show you within our dependencies is going to be our fun view, but it's super useful. It's called our wheel view. I also call this the dependency donut. You'll see why here in a second. So within the dependency or the wheel view, you can see all the dependencies all the teams that have dependencies in this period of time. And if I were to go in and let's say click on Tigers, Tigers is going to ultimately show me, if it allows me to click. Actually, I forgot, sometimes it's kind of funky like that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to go to, there we go. Now it worked. So Tigers is, I'm going to focus on it. It's going to give me a list of all the dependencies that are associated with Tigers, both work that others need from Tigers. So I can see all those. I can see where they're done. The nice thing is that 0 are not committed, 100% are committed, and 100% are done. And then work that Tigers needs from others. So here I can say, awesome. There's no non-committed, which is good. But only 75% of them are done. So I can see, hey, where are we at? Oh, hey, this remove analytic, this might be one I need to go worry about. So these are going to be things that I can see from a dependency perspective. So let's kind of see where we're at in that storyline so far. Again, we came up with a strategy. We broke that strategy into work. We roadmapped that work and then ultimately planned it out. We then started executing on it. We checked our progress to our program room. We've continued to monitor things like risks and dependencies. And for us now, at the very end of this kind of circle to bring it back home, our big goal is to say, well, all right, we did a bunch of work. Did it have an impact? Did it make an impact to what we're doing and like what that strategy is? And that ultimately comes back to our objectives. So let's take a look again at another view of objectives. So here what we're seeing is we're seeing our objectives tree in our newest view. And what this allows us to do is go in and actually see, hey, what is it that we're doing? What are the objectives we have? And then how are we doing against that from both a work perspective as well as a key result perspective? And so let's go ahead and look at evaluate the research. Here I can see that we've completed all the work associated with evaluate the research. But in terms of those key results, it looks like we're only part of the way there. And so if I go into this, I can see that I have a key result of research tool reuse. I've scored it at a 0.2, likely meaning that I'm not seeing that reuse that I'm looking for. So what this tells me here is that, hey, I did a bunch of work, but it didn't make the impact that I expected it to make. So I'm not impacting the strategy. So what do we do in a good Agile program? We say, let's pivot. Let's figure out, is there other work we need to do? Now, on the other side of that, and actually for this, I'm going to come up to my digital services here. One of the things we might see along the lines is going to be an aspect of, where are you? There's the one I have around here. It's a good example. Oh, maybe I don't. But one of the things you might find in here is that you go in, oh, that's why, because I need to go to the portfolio level, is that you have something like this objective here, this portfolio objective. Notice that 7 out of the 10 items are done. And right now we're about 50% done with our progress, our key results. If I click on my key result, I can see reduce call centers, center calls. Awesome. So right here, I'm seeing that I'm making a better impact. And what's even more, I can see here on becoming a market leader, I've only completed 1 out of 4 items, but I'm already at 63 and almost 64% of the way there. And the reason I bring these up is because let's say I'm at 80, 90, 100% of the way in my progress on those key results, and I've only done 2 of the items here. What that means is it says, hey, I should really determine whether or not I need to do the other 2. I've already made an impact to the outcome. So again, finishing off that circle, we started with strategy, we defined work, we executed that work, and we came back and we measured to say, how are we making an outcome? And then we're going to do it again. And that's kind of how those different layers start coming into play. And so for us, this gives us the ability to, again, connect it all the way back home so that we can see what's going on. So that's generally how Jira Align, the overall view. Again, there's 16 hours of training I can go in onto this. The last thing I do want to show you here before we're done, and I open it up for a couple questions, is going to be integration. So as I mentioned, Jira Align integrates with Jira, integrates with Trello, integrates with Azure DevOps. But for us, of course, at Atlassian, we focus in on the Jira and Trello integrations, and Jira most specifically, because ultimately we want teams to do the work in the place the teams are supposed to, which is Jira. Jira Align is really designed to be that layer that fits on top. And so for us, I want to show you real quick how that integration kind of looks. Now to do that, I'm going to pop into another instance of Jira Align because the one I was showing you isn't integrated anywhere. And so I'm going to go into one of my demo sites. And basically, the thing about it, integration works by bringing over and connecting the dots between the program and the team. So Jira features our Jira epics, which are features or whatever we choose to call them in Jira Align, stories, subtasks, these things will sync back and forth bi-directionally between Jira and Jira Align. Higher level objects in Jira Align, like portfolio epics, themes, those sorts of things, don't go to Jira. They don't need to go to Jira. And so for us, this is where that boundary lands. And so here I can actually see, I'm a big Battlestar Galactica fan, so I have Find the Arrow of Apollo. I have a bunch of information I put in here that's in Jira Align on this feature. I can see I have a button that says View in Jira, which is going to give me the ability to go see this feature in Jira. And Jira is going to have a similar button. And one of the things that is really impactful here that I find I always like to show is that as we're looking at this, there is a button up here on every object that's called the Y button. And so this gives me, if I'm in Jira Align, I can then see things like, hey, what's about this feature? What's the epic it's part of? What strategic theme is it part of? If I'm using WizGIF, what am I doing there? What measures, what business case? Gives me the ability to see those upper layers. Well, one of the issues you might find is that, hey, if I'm in Jira Align, I can see that beautiful. But if I'm in Jira and I don't go to Jira Align, how do I? That's unfortunate. That's a great thing for our teams to know. Well, we can actually send information like that down. We have limited information we send down, but we try to send down the most important stuff. So I click on my View in Jira button. It's going to go ahead and bring up my Jira Cloud instance where I can see information about that. And one of the first things you're going to see here is you're going to see at the very top, you're going to see this Y information. This is information I sent down into Jira from Jira Align. And it's going to give me all that information. So that way the teams in Jira, there's no need for them to get into Jira Align. They can go and see all the information they need to know right here to see what are they trying to do, why are they trying to do it. And of course, in here, I can go in and I can make updates in Jira. It sends it to Jira Align and vice versa. And then, of course, as I mentioned, I've got a web link right here that lets me go right back to where I was at. So Jira Align integration, again, it's a two-way syncing, allows you to do all that team level work in Jira and then aggregate it together in such a way in Jira Align that we can make meaningful decisions about our strategy. So with that said, that is essentially the demo we have. So I've got one more slide I'll show you at the end, but I'll pause for any questions that are out there about Jira Align, things that we're doing, anything you saw. So I'll open it up for any questions. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, so this session was pretty exhaustive and pretty elaborative. So nothing from my end as of now. So definitely I'll reach back to you if I have any, when I explore and do a deep dive actually.
Definitely. Exactly. You might need to watch it a couple times, be like, oh man, what were the things?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so I'll show you just the last thing I was going to bring up again. One of the things, of course, we're at a community event. Big thing as part of community I like to emphasize is the Jira Align community is super active from an Atlassian perspective. Like I mentioned, myself, I have a team of like 30 other folks who are solutions architects, and we are active on community. And I think we've been told by the community team that we're the most active Atlassians in community. So if you have questions or you're interested in things, definitely head out to the Jira Align community. We're a great location to go and learn some, again, if you have a question like, oh, how would you do this? One of our folks will be on there, quickly and responding to you. Just generally a great collaboration that we've seen out there. So definitely check that out. And then just if you ever want to connect, that QR code sends you to my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. I'm happy to answer questions for you in the future. If you're looking at Jira Align or if you're having troubles with something, feel free to reach out. I always say, hey, you've made a friend, you've made a contact. That's our goal, is to continue to make our customers successful. So with that said, that's all I have today, folks. Oh, you know what? I did say one other thing. One thing, if you'll look on my LinkedIn profile, you're going to notice that my current role is actually called a team doctor. So just to give you a little context on that, one of the things I'm doing right now, if you're familiar with Don Price, he's our work futurist. Myself and a few others are working with him right now to help explore how do we bring practices from Atlassian to our customers. So as part of that, we're branded as team doctors, helping to kind of solve those ailments that are with customers in terms of things like really bad meetings. How do you make decisions better? We've got some really cool ways that we do that here in Atlassian, and we're helping to spread that. So if you look out there and be like, Mark, I thought you said you were solutions architect. I always joke this, hey, I may play a SA by day, but I'm a doctor by night. So so there's that little context. So with that said, again, thank you all. I appreciate the time today. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions on anything.
Sure, Mark. Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for coming to Atlassian Community Singapore and Kolkata together. So today we got a very less participation. The reason being, it's a holiday here in India, both the places. But still, yeah, we got 6 participants at the peak, and somebody, I think, couple of them has left already. Yeah. So what I do is that after this session, maybe tonight or tomorrow morning, I upload this video in our YouTube channel. And definitely, I would publish it to all the community members that we have here in Singapore and Kolkata, so that whenever they have time, they could visit this, and they would definitely reach back to you if they have any questions. I will
Please
advocate
do.
that. I'll advocate that.
I love it. I love it. Well, that sounds great. Like I said, I totally, if you find yourself getting a lot of questions and you like to organize anything else, please let me know. Happy to help.
Sure, Mark. Our
Thank you,
pleasure.
Mark.
So I think we have Christoph and Sim. So do you have any questions for Mark?
Not for me. Thanks for sharing with us, Mark.
You bet.
No, not from my side right now. Thanks, Mark, for the demo.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
then
also
I think
national holiday here in Germany today, so not many people attended. Yeah.
Kind of office a little empty.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So yes, have a nice, for me, afternoon and you day.
There you go. You as well.
Thanks. Bye bye.
All right,
yeah,
folks.
bye-bye.
Thanks
Yeah,
so much,
bye-bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.